Well, thanks for coming. So I think tonight I'll just try and get through some slides for some background information. Marich is here, and we all kind of know each other, so I was kind of skipping the intro here. But I'm here, I guess, as a facilitator or a middle person for a process that's been going on for some time, starting in Yolngu. So starting in Yolngu in 2014, I was working in a mediation service, and it was during that time that we were seconded to start some communications at the least with the NLC about land ownership stuff on the Gove Peninsula. But we were already working on land ownership matters in Yolngu as well. And I think by that time we also had another matter that was Gove based, but it was sort of centred not so much about land ownership but on a project that was proceeding there. So but that's where I've come in. So it's been since 2014, been acting as somewhat of a mediator and a facilitator and an advocate. Marich is here tonight, and Marich's situation and all this, and I need to give you your mic. If you want to talk, just turn it on. So Marich comes in, and if I get it wrong, just get on the mic and correct me. Marich is Ngandipolo for one of the groups, Lamiri, who hasn't been recognised. And is your mother also a Lamiri descendant? Is that right, Marich?
Mother grandma is Yolngu.
Yeah. So she's Gutara for... Yeah. So he's got these connections with the Lamiri clan. He's also a Jambapoingal, and Jambapoingal have a connection to the Gove country. And he's also interested from a justice perspective as a reverend, a mighty reverend of the Uniting Church. When were you ordained? Last year, was it?
Yeah, last year.
As a deacon. Yeah. And I have to say that's part of my interest in this matter as well, because living as a Christian, I want to see some truth and justice, etc. But for clarity, we're talking about the Gove Peninsula, and I've made this little video. It's a bit slow, but as you can see, the Gove Peninsula is in Australia, and then it's part of the Northern Territory. That's Darwin, where it's pointing right now, and that is the Gove Peninsula area and the Yolngu country. So you can see the Gove Peninsula is over on the East Arnhem area, Northeast Arnhem, and this sort of corner of the map, which isn't showing up it's not showing up very well on the projector there. That's sort of Yolngu country there that we're pointing at with the pointer there. And then we'll zoom in on the Gove Peninsula. So you can see the areas that are they got bald spots because that's the mine. That mine's been there since I think 73. I think the lease was given in sometime in 1960s by the federal government. They didn't proceed mining until another decade or so, I think. Don't quote me on that. But it's in that vicinity. I'll point to some areas on the next map. I'll just stop that, because that map is not as well defined as the next one. So here we have the map of the Gove Peninsula. you can see this area here. This is the Nhulunbuy township. There's quite a bit of infrastructure there. This area is the disposal ponds for the mine. It's red because that's full of waste bulk, ore from when they used to refine the ore at Nhulunbuy. This area here is the old refinery. It's not currently operating and they're dismantling it now. There's a port there. This is Guniara, this area right here. You might have heard of Ski Beach or Guniara, that's a small township. Gulupa's over this side, there's another little homestead there. There's another group of houses at Bitterjimmy. This island over here, that's called Bremer Island, or Dumbalia is its proper name. That's associated with the Turi Jumbapoingal. Over here, where the line intersects, this town, that's Yurukala. So the Gove Peninsula is a bit of a busy place. It's got quite a bit happening there. And you can see the whole mine site there. So, in a nutshell, what we're here to talk about is the problems with land ownership and the determinations of land ownership on this country, on the Gove Peninsula area. So Gove Peninsula is this whole section here. And this is how the NLC divides up that country. That this white line is basically the borderline as they set it out. And I don't know this officially, this is unofficial. So what we've picked up in the 4 or 5 years we've been trying to research it. The north side there, they say that's Dua country, which is basically correct. We agree with that. But they say that's Ridjingal country. And they talk about it as though that's part of Ridjingal estate, that they're the principal landowning groups. South of that line, coming down to about this area here, because that area is where they hold Garma, that's Gulkula and Dupama, sort of some places there. And that's also the line, kind of the border. The border comes kind of here, you see the next one, for the Yiddicha side, because Yolngu world splits into Dua and Yiddicha. That's the Yiddicha side, and that's the NLC says that's Gumach land. So the NLC says it's sort of binary. It's separated in a binary between Ridjingal and Gumach. And in the last lease negotiations, the NLC decided that there's 2 small areas of land here that they say are owned by Gulpur, which is another clan group. That's the NLC perspective. And this is a representation of our group's sort of perspective. So instead of having a binary sort of separation, we have at least 3 groups there, but we know there's more groups. But they're the larger land holdings. And the black area there is what we are saying is Turi Jumbapoingal country. That's a clan estate. See that not Ridjingal, that Rainbow Cliffs mark there, that we know is another Ringish site separate to the estate, that's why it's marked there. But roughly you've got Turi Jumbapoingal, the red area there, it's not accurate so don't hold me to it, but that red area is roughly an area that could be claimed by the Durali group. The Durali group is not a clan group, it's a clan alliance group. And the white surrounded area is something that we would say is principally Lummeri clan group, and it's the estate of the Lummeri clan. So this is a bit different. It's immediately different to what the NLC says, but when we get into more detail, it's even more different to what the NLC says, because amongst that land, we're also saying there's other Ringish places. So Ringish is a clan, a grouping of clans, and they have often connected by a song line, pretty much always connected by a song line. Currently the NLC doesn't recognise a Ringish group as a landowning group. So So we would also put a number of places on that map that have a shared ownership between multiple clans. So, and it goes beyond that. So we'll get into it later a bit more. So that's sort of in a nutshell the issue, but it's not the whole issue. It's a bit more complex. But currently, Yolngu do have rights to this land under non-Indigenous law, and there's two places for that: the Land Rights Act and Native Title, the Native Title Act. So the Land Rights Act is from 1976, and it has two sort of parts to it which of interest to us, which is the traditional Aboriginal owners definition there. Traditional Aboriginal owners are people who have a common spiritual affiliation to a site on the land, and B, are entitled by Aboriginal tradition to forage as of right over that land. So it's a fairly, it's sort of well defined, but then at the same time broad. There's also another function of the Act that has is this arm of it, which is the decision-making side of things, and that becomes that, especially in the case for Yolngu, is to be done through traditional Aboriginal processes. So essentially, we're talking about what is Yolngu law. The consent process and the consultation towards agreement is supposed to be through Yolngu law, and effectively the determination of land ownership should be determined by Yolngu law. But those rights are given in the Land Rights Act. Are you still reading, Steve? Did you want more time? Sorry if you can't read it. That's part 77A of the Act, if you want to go back to it. Then we have the Native Title Act, which is 1993, post Mabo versus Queensland court case, and that's national land rights, whereas the the Aboriginal Land Rights Act is NT based. But Yolngu have the benefit of both these acts in protection of their land rights. So the issue at hand, and I've already presented a little bit of, is different opinions about some of these things. So we have an issue with the way land ownership is determined by the NLC, and then the governance, how they have determined governance. And the NLC uses a version of ownership based on clans only, which we've already discussed a bit, with consent based on governance by a few things. And again, this is unofficial. This is just what we can glean from the processes that happen around us. So the governance that they tend to pursue is some sort of gerontocracy, which is just a general idea where leadership is by the older. Could say the elders, I suppose, but it's very general, so it's not very defined. It doesn't offer us really something to pin a contract to, and meaning it leaves NLC with quite a bit of power in determining matters in betweens. Another way that we've seen it done is by a principal family, and this is particularly relevant for the Gove Peninsula. And the reality is the clan is basically the base unit of the society, and there's a number of families within that. So they're using a principal family within that unit. The strongman is also, we've seen that used where a political, the people who are politically stronger win over in the consultation, and we contest that's not accurate. Or an incorporated body like this is, and in rather recent times this is becoming more of a thing, but also less of a thing, so it's a bit weird because it doesn't happen every time. It's and basically you could pick between these four things which way the NLC consultation might happen. alternatively they might get it correct as well, but this is just what we're saying is at least our perceived general. And the affected community is not really often, they are not considered as binding in terms of, they don't have any right for veto or to stop things. Usually a consultation with the affected community is more information giving. And I don't think that's accurate to the Land Rights Act, actually. There's no lawyers here tonight, they could tell me. But I don't think it is. It's not within the spirit of the Act, we could say. So what we have is a debate about how we determine facts, and that's very much something I want to focus on in what we're talking about, because the issue is not about one group winning over the other. It's about trying to determine truth, trying to get a robust and informed outcome. But it's pretty obvious that in determining facts, the basis of those facts is the Yolngu system of law, the Madaean system of law. So these things are mirrored. They should be mirrored. And that's the way we're approaching what we do and have done in the past. And so we've actually mapped it already. And some of you guys might be familiar. We've put it in a booklet so you can actually buy this. And so what we've been doing is with the group, and our group is made up of those groups like Lammeri, Duri Jamapong and Durali, but also others, including Gumach and Ridajingal. And our mapping has included peoples outside the Gove Peninsula, so it's consistent with a Yolngu frame of, it was upside down, so a Yolngu frame, this is about Yolngu law, it's not Gove Peninsula law, this is Yolngu general law. And with that we're talking about it allows us to have a systematic approach to a determination. Just roughly, Yolngu law is really constituted on a few things, at least we could say that in picture form. The land is essential to the constituting of what law is, the people, and the stuff of law, so the cultural stuff that people are part of, its maintenance, its creation, its ongoing use. It's there for reference, right? and so it has these three parts. I mean, that's obvious. It should be obvious to us. We have law in our society. Probably the only difference actually there is that the land is not constitutional in our law, in non-Indigenous law. But otherwise, it's an identifiable system. These objects down below are often, particularly the bag that's represented down the bottom, is it like an article of reference. The guy in the tree there, that's referencing a Ngada institution. So there's a whole ceremonial, ritual enactment that occurs and it's called Ngada Rom, and it encapsulates a whole bunch of powers and authorities for the society. And that's what there's down the corner, that's a little waro, a little shade area, so again reflecting on Ngada Rom. You've got a whole bunch of cultural knowledges. The animals are representing sort of some of the totemic structure and identity, the wangad perhaps. And then you've got the Bilma with the Manake, there's all the official song cycles. That's just roughly, so that's a rough idea of this system and how it's contained. You'll see this is in real life, in Arnhem every day. This photos of some people having come out of a Gumach group with their Junga. The Junga, the ladies, and some of the guys at the back, they're from the, I think they're Yolngu, is it? Or Datiwe? I think they're Datiwe, aren't they? Like, these ladies are Datiwe, aren't they? Yeah. And that's the Yorti-Indi relationship, so they're part of the doing of this institution, and the young men in the painted up, they've been inside having the education that's part of that forum and that space, and that's it's moral and again teaching and again learning the parameters of the law, and there's the Yolngu space, you know. The old man down in the corner, he's passed away. He was a senior, very senior Gumatj person. His son's at the back there with the Bilma. He is a Lamiri descendant, and he's with the Bilma. He's got the songs for Langara, but also for the Lamiri funerals and whatnot. Those identity-related songs. Here you'll see some more. These guys up the top, that's a Dua Ngara. That's outside of Dua Ngara. The trees in the back there you can see again, just briefly. And the guy you can see is the Paduma Mukabati. That's often a clear sign of governing authority in these spaces. So people will be carrying these, or they'll be in the space. They create the idea of authority in that space. The symbolic references to estate, land, and people. Again, creating this container of society, what governs and connects society. Got old man Garley down here is doing probably dance with the Morning Star, which he has permission to do from, I believe, Jumperpongal. And he does that regularly, even though I don't think it's his clan groups. The Galpo, it's not, wouldn't be sort of Morning Star dance. It's not a Galpo owned song, is it? But he's got authority to dance it, and yeah. So you have these sort of relationships where people will be given law stuff, and they enact it and keep it alive. And then over there you've got that's the Yurukala panels from the church at Yurukala. They're now in the Bukalange Art Centre, and that's a famous record of governing paintings, so that are connected to clans, various clans that were based in Yurukala, identifying paintings. So there's all these sort of objects, and this is all, we can all summarise this in Jalkari Rom, this sort of stuff. And it's part of that, like the Minchi, we can call that like Madayan. Madayan is the word for the general law, you know. And then the system has individual authorities as well, and here's some pictures of the men in the trees. They're called, for the Yiddish side, it's the guys in the yellow there, they're Dalkarmir, and the dual guy in the tree up there, he's Jidikangir. They're very strong titles that enable these people to act in authority and political authority as well. We've got Nyomba down here. She's wearing the dilly bag for, I don't know whose group, it might be hers, it might be someone else's, but it's referencing that she has been bestowed some authority, you know, and she has a title called Gonganmir, which is a title for those who make the dilly bag for the Dulma Mukabati, but these also carry political power with them for, you know, judgment in groups, and the role of helping things work properly. All right. Here's another example of a decision-making group. You've got a Junga. the people that are often referenced, Junga, they work for the Yindi group, which is represented by the guy on the ground, the owner group. The Guttara, these are commonly referenced titles. There'll be someone delegated these roles. The Master of Ceremonies, he is an owner of a ritual process or an institution. This picture comes from an actual situation in Ngara where they're deciding the next day's work. And the host for that, the Ngara institution in that case, was sitting on the ground. This was Kenny. He was sitting on the ground. The Master of Ceremonies was my Gurung who passed on Jeffrey. The Guttara, I can't remember who it was, and the Jungaha was, I can't remember who it was, but these were real people, and the way they made their decision was the host was sitting there, or from the host group in that case, and then the Junga and Guttara, the Master of Ceremonies, actually had a conversation separate from that person, but in earshot. So they were actually running the show, but he had the capacity of veto, this sort of thing. This law also gives us the basis for, what we've done already in terms of trying to inform the NLC about the situation, and if we pursue we intend to pursue a native title claim, the basis of that claim, right? This here is my own makeup of a kinship mapping, and I did it simply because I knew I needed to get to the Guttara for the Lammeri, because in the Lammeri issue, what we're actually facing is an anthropological debate about who succeeds or who inherits, and we're arguing that the Guttara always inherits, and actually they are still Lammeri. Lammeri still exists, not a deceased group, and they exist through the matrilineal line, because the patrilineal line failed at Mangatu. He's written up there on the top. But the process in law is that the inheritor is the line, the clan group continues by a switch through matrilineal line. The Guttara, which is the grandchildren through the mother's line, receive that identity, you could say. And so what I've got is a list of them down the bottom. There's many more. So they're easily found, is the point, once we know the mechanism of law. So we can actually, we can write down the entire Lammeri group through kinship records, right? Articles of law, they help us to determine ownership of spaces. This is connected to the Miri story. There's sites just west of, on the west side of Yurukala, which is where the Dua side of Yurukala is claimed based on this story, the Jara Miri story. And there's two sites, Ganyapino and Nor, these sites. And so there's sort of an authority invested in the people who have these objects, but also generally they can tell you the truth about those things, but also that connects to the other objects that the other clans who are associated with that site will have. So you can reference truth out of that if you so need to, because it will connect to other groups, and there's a physical object that references that story. Here, which is the picture we were playing around with before because we're trying to get it clear, you can see it in the land as well. So it's not difficult actually to define once you start putting together some of this stuff together in a systematic way. And what we have here is a few sites. Ruak is over on the island. That's the Duri Jamapoil, and that connects to, I believe, their central story. there's Gangaru there, which is the town lagoon at Nhulunbuy, which currently is, the NLC has determined is Gulpur. We don't have a problem with Gulpur being central to the governance of that, but we want to go further and say that's a Ringgit site. And we can tell by the nature of the songline that connects that place. The arrows here represent the mapping of an ancestral being, their travels. I'll read the story if you like. I won't read it, it will take too long, but that is mapping the movements of Woyl, the Woyl. And that's a story associated with the Durali, and there's a honeybag story connected to it that connects the whole Durali group, and Woyl is a figure in that story. This photo is taken from the hill where there's a Telstra tower there, looking back towards Nhulunbuy. That is a hill, Nhulun. So from that hill, he travelled to the Nhulun Hill, and then out to Dimbalgur, which is in the middle of the red mud ponds, and the rock's still there, which identifies the site. And then he travelled back something like this to Gullaruk, which is the East Woody Island, which people regularly visit. But you can see just there, by mapping that out, the area of country that grouping is going to have some claim over. So once you get into a systematic deduction of these things, people think it's hard, but it's not actually that hard, right? And it's systematic, it's official, the truth can be found, the truth can be discovered. So from our work, we would put these rules of land ownership, that the Bapuru is synonymous with a single estate, interlinked with core identity law, bound in Delkiri Rom, Manake song lines, Minchi paint designs, and Giritiri dance, a Dulma Mukubati, and a constitutional article of law. So when we're talking about an estate, we're talking about a large tract, and a clan, every Bapuru clan has one estate. They can't have two, they can't have three, and that immediately gives you a clue to some of the problems on the Gove Peninsula, because Gomai's estate is quite a bit south of the Gove Peninsula. Regional estate is just a little bit south of the Gove Peninsula. We also would say Ringgit is synonymous with various small land holdings or plots across the region relating to a Manukau songline. So these are sites intermittent within each the estates, so you can have differing groups having small plots of land within states. If you don't know this, it becomes very confusing when you're talking to people about what's what, because you can be standing in somewhere and not far away somebody different will be saying that's my land. So you can be standing here and they're saying this is our land, whatever, and then a day or so later you're standing in a different spot and someone was saying this is my land, and you're thinking, well, who's a cheeky bugger, or who's not telling the truth? But actually they're both telling the truth, because just over there happens to be a Ringgit plot, which that person has safe haven in and can consider it their own, and really they should be considered a TAO by the virtue of the Land Rights Act, which says TAO, remember the bit about the right to use the land? Well, in the Ringgit, each clan who is associated with that Ringgit has the right to use the land. So we need to have Ringgit in, and the governance of the estates and Ringgit land holdings.
Kendall.
Yeah.
So Ringgit is sort of like common land, like it has a number of owners, like what we would call Ringgit here.
Yeah, you could say something like that.
Belonging to nobody or everybody, but there is a number of clan groups that would have a claim over that.
But you could say it's a common land to a group of clans, a Ringgit group. Yeah.
So it's not exclusively one clan.
No, not exclusively one. Like We'd actually argue that maybe there's no land in Yolngu country that's exclusively one clan's use, but principally in a Ringgit spot, you've got multiple clans who have dedicated ownership. They would have ownership, you'd say. An estate, you'd say clan has ownership. You could clearly say they have ownership. And that's what we have to define, because it doesn't work.
Who do you define as we or us? When you're talking, you say we.
I mean, the group that I'm working with, which is basically Lamiri, Durijambapoingal, Durali. And as the final rule on this slide indicates, Māori Guttura Yoti Indi unit, which we haven't actually discussed yet, but this is part of the governance, which connects, that's why Ridijingo and Gumach are connected to that Gove country, but as Guttura, in the Māori Guttura connection in governance. So in governance, this is why it becomes more technical. Let's say, who has use of the land? Well, this is a very interesting question, and especially in terms of the Land Rights Act, who do we say is a traditional Aboriginal owner? Because we have this overarching net that's called kinship. We talk about kinship, but there's such a thing as clan kinship, and defined by the land and the relationship in the land. That, like, Maricha and I, he's my malo, my father. I'm his gatu, his son, like this. Well, you have interrelating relationships like this. Māori Guttura is the grandmother-grandchild relationship. Māori Guttura relationship in clan, in country, it's hard to separate, actually. And like before, I showed you that slide with the individual authorities, and there was that man called the Guttura. Well, he's going to be there in decision making, and he's quite often from that land-related Guttura, not individual kinship, but from a land relationship between clans, but also possibly from individual relationships. So it's a bit technical there, but the governance of states and Ringgit land holdings interrelate with principles of the Songlite at a given space, and then with Māori Guttura Yoti Indi clan kinship. So this has to be included, and actually that's technically wrong. I said clan kinship, should just say kinship, because like I said before, you can have it through clan kinship or individual kinship. It works both ways. But so you see what I'm saying? Like, so when we say our group, we're trying to be as inclusive as the law allows us to be, Yolngu law. And that means that our grouping, we have to talk so that we're understandable to the people outside. I don't know who they are, but the general public, we have to say, okay, so we work with the Lamiri, the Durijambapoingal, the Durali, but in actual fact, we're inclusive of the Māori Guttura Yoti Indi interrelations, both clan and kinship, and the Ringgit holdings. So we end up, if we were to discuss just on a clan basis, we'd have a list of 22, 30 clans, right? That's who we say we. I don't know, but we start with the law, and we start with those powers defining them out, and we get to a real picture. And this is sort of what, on that basis, this is what a land, if you were to paint a land, the land, your country, you would might have something like this. This is what I mean by the green is, let's say, Yirita, the red is Dua land, but those encirclements represent a clan, a state, so a larger portion of land that connects with their primary identity. But within it and on its borders, they might have all these sort of outcrops of Ringgit places. So that's what the little circles represent. If you don't know that, it can become very confusing. But at the moment, the NLC is saying those little spaces, they just dedicate one single clan to it and say, you're the traditional owner. And that causes a lot of problems because it's not right. There's injustice in that. So, yeah.
Why the Land Council have this term traditional owner? If it doesn't work for Yolngu, and it certainly doesn't work for Garawa that we're more familiar with.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resentment amongst the Garawa there because a lot of these supposed traditional owners have fenced off their land and are putting cattle on there and making money for themselves, but not for the group. And yet, you know, a better word would be custodian. If you're looking for a word that would be better.
Well, I think it's just the way it is. Like traditional Aboriginal owner comes out of the Land Rights Act, and it was how it was written, and I wasn't there, so I don't know.
So why can't it be changed?
It would have to be changed in the legislation, you know, so that's the answer. I think that, but the part of the problem that we have in Gove is that they've defined that they've made an error in the definition of that, and that's partially why there's confusion, because reality is the TAO should be all the groups that I've just mentioned, the Bapuru, the clan group, as well as the Ringich groups, as well as then, depending on the circumstances, like whether, you know, clan estates definitely should have Mari Gupta at least considered TAOs, if not Yorti Indi, if not the upper group. So it's got to do with the definition that NLC has made, God bless their soul. It's happened out of possibly reasonable things and possibly unreasonable things, but it's happened, and that's where we're at. So we're trying to correct that. But so we've got this definition of the Land Rights Act. That's what we're given, but you can see clearly they haven't made the correct determination, because actually the Yolngu law is the defining law. They've made it that way, and that definition is, you can see, is quite broad, and it works in the Yolngu context. Like if they got it right, you know, like it's broad enough to be workable, but it is, as you say, a very confusing terminology for people, because it's not clear what it means, especially from the Indigenous perspective, because the Indigenous person has their law, and then there's dudes are talking about traditional Aboriginal owner with all sorts of definitions of that. And in Arnhem there's multiple definitions of that, absolutely. And, you know, yeah.
And in the ringgit spaces on that last diagram, what kind of size?
No, they're generally quite relatively quite small compared to the estate.
Yeah, so
if we call,
is it an acre, a room size, or what are we talking?
Could be.
Are they useful land spaces, like is it? Are they sacred?
10 acres, 1 acre.
Or is it a fishing hole? Or
Yeah, well, it could be any of those things, really. Could be an acre, could be less.
just depends what it is.
Yeah, it depends what it is and because often it's associated also with. It can be also protecting something, and I would say, I don't know about what you think, Marla, but a lot of those Ringich places, they're also sacred sites. They protect some valuable, parameter of law, and so their use should be limited. What can be done with those spaces, and I don't think that's even an issue that's been considered as of yet. So, like for example, in Gove, if that that lagoon is a Ringich place, if there's a story attached to it, which is a parameter of law, it needs to be protected. So then, how do you, in their case, how do you give compensation for the damage that's been done by having the town uphill from it? You know what I mean? In the runoff, they haven't even considered that, and that's been what some of the issues around compensation of recent times, leaving aside land ownership. But those who have been included in the lease, they're not happy with the way royalty compensations have been considered, because they haven't even taken into account those sort of details. But so Ringich places, I'm not the most experienced person, but my understanding is they're not a large area, and they can be quite small. They can be up to the acre sort of size. They could be reasonable. I'm thinking of one in Gullinkul, which is around some sort of lagoon. It could be a spring. I've never actually stood at the spot, but it'd be quite large. It could be an acre. In Nhulunbuy, where we're talking about the Durali group, well, that's a convergence of Ringich places, and that ends up being quite a large area. It's kind of special in that way, because they converge on one another, which is why that group has wanted to do it together, because they want to keep it all together, and not with single clan representation for each spot. It makes sense, certainly. And it's all part of the one story, even though there's other defining elements to it. So we've covered a bit of that, because this is land title and governance, and what we're saying is that so particularly the governance should include the clan-based authorities by the Madain system of law. So if you're doing a consultation for consent, you can read the first part. So the first part, and this is different again to the NLC, so we're saying the first part, there should be a national level recognition that Yolngu are actually together. Whereas currently we just divide them up into clans, which, as you'll see in the next frame, is it's quite a division. It really reduces the size of their unified strength. They have a national identity, is what I'm saying, and it should be recognised. From there, governance should include clan-based authorities determined by the Madain system of law, the Yapamari Guttura Yorti Indi clan kinship and kinship authorities, and then a consultative conventions, which is a Yolngu consultative conventions, which I won't go into, and the infected community would be much more stronger, because once you get into these Ringich connections and Mari Guttura Yorti Indi connections, all the neighbouring estates are actually really well interwoven to the interests of their other neighbour, and vice versa. And so an affected community becomes quite a strong and tangible unit as well. So, so here we have the social organisation that we're talking about. Dui Yedicha, that's the national level. We then could break up into clan or Baparo and Ringich groups, and then clan kinship. And I just want to share a bit about clan kinship, because there's not a lot of too much known about it. But clan kinship is defined by the matrilineal line of the regular individual clan kinship relationships. And I forgot to put this screen on a white background because it's blocking out most of the other kinship names, but it is highlighting the matrilineal kinship names. And so what you get is, from the top, Yappa Wako. This is a Yorti Indi relationship, but this also connects down to this group as Yappa groups. Here you have the Mari, which is the grandmother end of things. They would then call this group. So if this was me in the middle here, that's my Mari. That's Mari Guttura, that's the Mari Guttura Connect. Ngandi Wako, that's why we're saying Marich is here as Ngandi Pulo. His group is like Ngandi for the Lamuru here. He's the Indi for the Yoto, that relationship. So they have a close governing relationship. I'm assuming that's Jumper Point or Lamuru, right? Ngandi, Yoti Indi. Is that where we're saying Ngandi Pulo? Yeah. Wakapolo, yeah. Yeah. And you're Ngandi Pulo. Yeah. So that's where that reference comes from, that Ngandi mother-child relationship. And then it continues down here. Here we go, mother-child relationship, Yindi Yoto, and here's the Guttura come back up, so that they're Guttura for them. So this creates actually a really broad net for the whole society in a close, interconnecting, governing way. And that's hard to explain in 5 minutes, but that's just a picture. Here's another picture. If you could reflect on a group of clans in one go, each of the colours are a clan group, And you'll see in this, so the red one, for the red one, here we'll start in the centre. So here's a particular clan group. The green's his Ngandi group. The orange is his Wako group.
We can't see we.
Oh, sorry, I'm using my finger, not this. So here's the clan group, an example. This is how this works. Here's the Ngandi group, here's the Wako group. Now if you take a step sideways and you make this the clan group, this the principal group you're looking at, that group before is their Ngandi group. You see how it sort of shifts over. Do you see that? It's a bit hard to explain quickly, but you can. The colours are the same groups; they're the same groups. Depending on which perspective you look at, you'll have different groups named Mari Gutura Yotindi. And so we start here with this clan group. Their Ngandi is the red group, their Wako is the blue group, their Mari is the green group. You step over this side, and now they've become the Wako group for this clan group, and that previous Mari is now Ngandi for them, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but this creates a net that interlinks neighbouring groups, and so you'll have whole regions are really tightly networked, and then that next region will be networked equally as it borders the other region, you know what I mean? So it creates this very tight unit, which is why this is actually the whole scene here, where you've got Duyacha, one divide at national level, Bapara Ringgit is your principal day-to-day operating, organising units, and then you've got this interlinking function down here with clan kinship. And individual kinship obviously even further intermeshes. So that's what I'm getting at. And so that's how you get this, because this video shows all this in action. So you don't get an institution in Yolngu world operating with all that going on in the background in the governance end. So that's how the unit's working. It's different to like our society. Compared to Yolngu society, we have a fairly significant centralisation, whereas they are able to act as a national unit with pretty extreme decentralisation compared to our society. But it works nonetheless. It brings large groups together in a very functional way, and also really, I would argue, a very caring way. Everyone's related and they know their relations, at least once you're older, and how to work within those relations. So now this song, so this is at a funeral, and this involves that whole unit that we're talking about. So we'll just watch that. You see the children involved as part of their educational process of how to be good citizens, and how they connect with one another. It's embodied education. So as you can see, like there's quite a few, possibly 100 people there, all operating in unison, and that represents an actual picture of that Barbara Ringich and Yorti Indi Maragapura network. So it's real and alive, is what I'm trying to say. So that is what I guess that's the argument that we would be putting to. We've put to the NLC in one way or the other, but we'd also be putting in a native title claim. Those are the sort of corrections we want to happen. Now, we in our process we've already tried to correct things and gain assistance through the NLC. This was their response after some 2 years of communication with them, and I think there was 5 official letters. They said that the NLC has previously considered those disputes when performing its function, most recently in relation to consultations for the 2011 Gove Agreement, for which specific anthropological advice was obtained. That advice confirmed the NLC's long-standing position that members of the Gumage, Ridajingal and Gulpur, sorry for the spelling mistake, groups are the traditional Aboriginal owners of the areas of Aboriginal land subject to the Gove operation. This position broadly accords with Blackburn Jay's findings in the 1971 Gove land rights case, and the manner in which that case was put by Yolngu. Now, that is from experience. There's a lot of technicalities in there that are not true. So we know this because of the ongoing conversation with them, and also what we've been managed to also obtain through NLC documents, affidavits that came out of Ginny Gondara's case in 2012. Also, they talk about things like NLC's long-standing position that members of the Gumage, Ridajingal and Gulpur groups are the traditional Aboriginal owners. Gulpur was not included as traditional Aboriginal owners in 2011. Before that, they weren't even considered. The bit about in the bottom that this adheres to Blackburn Jay's findings. Well, Blackburn Jay was not determining who the landowners were. His job was to determine whether or not Yolngu, as the case was presented to him, had proprietary rights. That was what he was determining. This response was basically to try and put me off. I'm not a legal expert. Should have been enough to make me feel little, I suppose. I shouldn't put it in those terms, but that seems how it is to me. And also, it's it's not consistent with their own conversation happening in their own institution. So the point of that, showing that, is that that's the sort of response we've had. We haven't had an engagement. Not only that, but the NLC has proceeded to pursue leases in the Gove Peninsula that has specifically there's been objections raised to those leases in the consultation period. The one up in the corner here, this one here. This is a map of the area around Gulkula or Dupama, where the Garma site is, which I think it was the end of, I think it was about the end of 2016. The NLC granted a lease there to the Gumage Corporation for mining. They didn't consult. The consultative group was the Gumage group, and this was contrary to anything we were communicating to them, and we communicated the objections at the time. And quite frankly, we don't know whose country 1/3 of this goes in. This area here.
Where's the rocket?
I never mapped that. So this also shows where the rockets, which is the next slide, the sublease, I believe that's it there. So this is in that area of land that we as a group haven't mapped yet. I'm sure if we sat down a number of people from our group, they quickly determined, because the neighbouring groups to the south here, you have Ridajingal country, you have this way, this side, you go towards Darling Boy and Wongaree country go this sort of way, I think, not that way, somewhere more towards the west, and you've got Ngamiel country, I believe. So, and see, this is where we put our sort of borderline for the Lulmeri. So it's actually going over into someone else's country altogether. But the NLC granted that in 2016 despite the conversation. This shows here the area that they've granted for the 99-year lease. And that's almost undoable. The legislation that grants a 99-year township lease is almost unchallengeable. You have to prove basically fraud by, I can't even remember accurately, I think it's a proponent group, so whoever wants the lease, it's technical, and I think it's almost impossible to undo. I don't know. Well, when we end up looking at the Gunyara lease, we'll see what happens, because in that case, I think Gumatj Corporation could be named as the proponent group, I don't know, but could be an interesting case for someone later, some lawyer who wants to talk jargon. But that was also contested by our group during the process of trying to communicate with the NLC and the minister. So what I'm trying to point out is we've got quite a problem. It's not a tiny. This is not a localised dispute or something. Like this is embedded and contracted, unresolved differences with real outcomes of people stealing land effectively. No one in our non-Indigenous culture would allow for this. We wouldn't allow for it. And
We lost our port to China.
except there was lawful process. No, but there was lawful process. I'm saying we haven't even followed lawful process, and that's what this picture here is about, the rockets of recent times, which really put together a strong anti-government push, an NLC push, a corporate push for Gumatj Corporation, the proponents themselves, the ELA, and we had the mine involved in developing East Arnhem Land, their government mine subsidiary group supposedly there to help revive Nhulunbuy after the mining, the refinery arm of the mine closed. This is their brainchild. So I think that's an accurate picture of the kind of rockets they will be sending out. So I'm not exaggerating. So I think they're saying up to 20-metre tall rockets they're going to blast from there. So we've got a real problem, but what I want to say is that the underlying problem also is not the land. It's not the land issue. There's something else way bigger going on. And this picture is from my recently deceased Ngapati, Matthew's his English name. And this represents a real sentiment of Yolngu, and I think a lot of other Indigenous groups in the Northern Territory, about what's going on. Despite the fact that we've got land rights and native title, what's been going on, particularly since the intervention, has been a very strong push from institutions, corporate interests and government interests into the Yolngu space, but not in an inclusive way, but an excluding way. So you can see as all that infrastructure and new and good things come in, they're not doing it in a Yolngu way. They're actually they're just importing a Western model and consequently pushing out the Yolngu way of being. So, and that's reflected then in what's going on in Gove, because these are external interests that are being pursued and granted for what? The purpose of economic growth, perhaps some, things that are arguably good, let's say. But that's what it ends up looking like. And that's what the Gove looks like. That's what a lot of Yolngu communities look like. And I dare say quite a lot of Indigenous space in the Northern Territory. So part of what we're doing is also engaging with that issue, and we're sort of targeting this one need here as part of this bigger issue. We're sort of thinking if we can help save the law there and get it back into the centre there, we might have more success than just getting land ownership right, you know what I mean? It's about giving some power back to Yolngu people so that they can progress and develop in the way they need to. So, got a jumble of things going on there, but this is sort of what we're about and what we're doing and trying to do, and the issues that face us. So, how to respond. So when we booked this hall, we were just doing this as an informational, but about 2 or 3 weeks ago at the Gove Festival, that group announced that, which I would broadly call the Gumach Corporation Group, announced that they were going to pursue a native title for the Gove Peninsula, which might seem as coincidence, but I'm here to tell you that it's not. And amongst all these papers, we have a letter from Bowden McCormack, the Gumach Corporation of Lawyers, and I'm very proud to show this because 2 years ago, Maricha, I showed you Charlie earlier, and Jarlo, who's a senior person with Gulpal, they managed to find themselves some litigation funders to fund a native title claim on the Gove Peninsula. As all litigation funders go, they want to get a return, which is fair enough. And in that vein, they didn't want a contested native title matter. And so they asked Maricha's lawyers and these people to send invitation letters to the two corporations, Ridgewell Corporation and Gumach Corporation. Of course, Gumach Corporation wrote back and said, we are going to contest this if you do it. The litigation funders fled as a result. So the announcement 2 weeks ago wasn't really coincidence. It seems actually a long time coming, and but it appears that it's coincidence. But it appears that we're standing here as some sort of reaction, but we're actually not. Like I said, we booked this hall before that announcement. But that's the history, and even though our group actually contains Gumach people, that we expect that these guys will bring on a native title. They've said this in the media within a few months, so that's why we're now scrambling to fundraise for a native title. We think that to contest the case, so we might very likely become contestants now ourselves, and in a way we have to, because if we want an accurate outcome, we have to be involved. So we started, our response is to now start a campaign. This is sort of the aim, and I think this has been the aim the whole time, is to help Gove Peninsula return to a state of Margao, which is an important Yolngu concept. It translates something like shalom, or peace, justice, order and good governance. And we would help return Gove Peninsula to a state of Margao by reasserting the rule of law in Yolngu country by using the native title process. That's actually our big aim. We're quite contrary to probably other groups. We've never been about pursuing. There is a compensation element. We've never been about that. We want to use, and have always wanted to use, the native title tribunal as a means of working things out, as a conciliatory action to bring groups together and for the future lay down a foundation that non-Indigenous and Indigenous people are going to listen to. It's a two-ways forum, and that's one of the at least from my perspective, one of the useful things about a native tribunal, we get to talk about exactly what we want to talk about. Whereas if we were pursuing through the Land Rights Act, we might have to enter through some, argument about some detail in the Land Rights Act that we need to deal with before we can actually talk about the land and the law. And we're putting together now a native title claim, which we didn't expect to be in this place right at this time, but we were hoping to have a very soft re-engagement with it at this point, which was actually the original purpose. So for you guys, that's some of the information, and I think I have talked a long time, but that's just like dumping a lot of information on you. Maurits is here, and I think it would be good to give him a clear opportunity to answer any questions or comments, right? But if you're interested, we will have, this site is up, but it's not, I can give it to you before you go, but this is where we're receiving donations. But where we're at is, we have the group, but we have to raise the funds to participate. And we have the background, because we have the substance for the application, and we have the people are ready in a general way. They've been ready for some years. But we do need to raise a significant amount of money, and so on that site we're talking about 375,000, which is an enormous amount for an online based campaign, but we will have some networks available to us to hopefully do some groundwork on that. But I guess that's where we have to be. We don't have a choice. So I guess what I want to say is that if you've listened tonight and you have some interest in it, or see the need for what we're doing, maybe just to think about how you might be able to support this project. And quite obviously we need money, but also we need networks, and we need people thinking about how we can achieve things in an imaginative way, even, you know what I mean? So I guess that's it. That's all I want to say there. Now we have another meeting in 2 weeks' time at Casuarina Uniting Church, so that's immediately also one way you might be able to help, is just by advertising that and letting people who might be interested know about that. Maurits, you might be back in Gulliwinkle by then, but there's a number of people connected to our group in Darwin, so there might be somebody else that can come to that meeting. And we'll hopefully be putting more online as well. So I'll leave it there. This will be up on the Chuff site at some point soon. I'm just waiting for one of the networks to give me permission to put their name on it. But we're ready to go with that, because we're auspiced by Yolngu Nations Assembly. They're a charitable group, and they can manage the money, and I'll be managing that side with them as well. We have lawyers ready. We have the people ready, so we'll see what we can do and where we can go. Well, I don't know. Might leave that one up. But I think if there's any questions, I think we can do that now. It's probably, I don't think, I understand it's a lot of information, so Maurits is here, and he's a good resource. So have you got your mic there? Yeah, so I think you can ask me a question, but I mean I would encourage you to also particularly ask Maurits a question, and I'll leave it at that if that's okay. I mean, also, if you want to say something, you might. It's up to you.
This one place where because we are sort of very closely related to one another, sometimes in this area. We're not taking anyone to no offense to anyone, but in the area of justice and reconciliation and freedom for our people, in order for the Magaya Rome peaceful and good governance for our people. There needs to be some place where Yolngu people are not really doing the right thing. What the Marian law states, Marian law, because it's the law that governs Yolngu people right across, and it gives us some foundation, some status even for how to relate to one another accordingly, to land, country, and to one another. And this is how we've operated since beginning of time. And before there was a lot of, like the other law coming in through, like Baranda law coming and try to sometimes causing confusing for our people, and we want to get back to that Yom where we're being respectful to land, country, and to other clan groups. This is something that's I would pursue that direction. And sometimes we are not, there's some, there's a lot of pseudo leaders even in the communities that try to pull us this way, that way, and our people are really confused. And I think it's really, we have to take a stand and do what is right and proper. This is the area where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Well, if NLC is meant to be looking after the interests of Yolngu people, why are they not listening to this story? Why have they got their opinion and they won't hear this story?
Well, this is continuing story like that happening all the time. They want to confuse the Tao and not giving us Tunpas Tao, straight Tao to our people. And that's part of the confusion happening. We need to continue work at them because they see they've got their own ways. It's not really happening to, they've got their own interests and things like that. You know, power, that's right. Yeah, power. Power game.